guys, it's Trina, and today I'm talking to you guys about my least favorite books of the year. I read a total of 88 books this year, and out of the 88, there are 5 that I'm talking about today that were my absolute least favorite. And then I'm also going to include the books that I DNF'd this year. I don't count these towards the number of books I read, but I did want to somewhere just talk about the books that I didn't finish, that I put down, and why. So that's going to be included in this video as well. If you aren't into negative opinions, which is totally fair if you aren't, I do have a favorite books of the year video already up, so you guys can check that one out instead if that's more your cup of tea. I'm not going to be summarizing these books because I've already talked about them in full in my monthly wrap-ups throughout the year, so you can search my channel for any of these book titles if you want to hear more about them or like my full reviews. But I do have these 5 least favorite books ranked, like there was a definitive order when I was looking at them. So starting out at number 5, my 5th least favorite book of the year was Wayfarer by Alexandra Bracken, which is the second book in her Passenger duology. I liked Passenger, but the high that that book ended on did not carry through with Wayfarer to me. Wayfarer was like a total reset, and you had to like start over and just start building everything again, and so the pace really slowed down for me. To me, it wasn't gripping at all. I felt it was poorly paced, it was too slow, it was way too descriptive, very, very info dumpy. And for a book that is an action adventure story about time travel and romance, there was very little action or romance in it, in my opinion, so like this book just was a disappointment. So yeah, not for me. At number 4 is The Circle by Dave Eggers. This is an adult sci-fi book. This book has an amazing premise that sounds right up my alley. I was so excited to read it, but the book like did not follow through. It had zero arc of action. There was no climax, there was no conflict at all. Like, you're just reading this story and you felt like it was building and building and building to something, and it just ended. So very unfulfilling. I know some people like how this book ended and feel like the ending was there to be creepy or spooky. I totally did not feel that way. I don't think he drove it home enough if that was the point. This book was very long, and so many pages in it were just dedicated to the main character's day-to-day work at her office. Like, I honestly feel like I could go to her job and do her job for her because it was described in that much detail that often. So, I mean, it read more like a workplace manual than this amazing sci-fi technological concept that it led with. I felt like the things that I was thinking on my own outside of the book were more interesting than the actual words on the page were. It just didn't fulfill the premise in a way that I wanted it to. So for me, it was a disappointment. At number 3 is Perfect Days by Raphael Montes. I gave this book 1 star. I just don't think that this one was well written in any way, shape, or form, but I do see why some people would like it. This is a thriller that is following a stalker who has kidnapped a girl, and again, this book just had no story arc. There was no conflict and resolution and all of this stuff. It just like was this one thing and then just carried on being this one thing, and anytime you thought that a plot twist was going to happen, it was reversed within like 10 pages, and it just failed at building suspense for me or like making you root for things that would happen, because like whatever you would root for just was never going to happen. It just was a book that nothing happened in it. The characters were so bland, and I mean, the main character that you're following is a stalker, but he wasn't very interesting. When a book is following the bad guy, I expect it to like mess with your mind and your emotions and like make you see why they are doing that thing. Like, that's kind of like the edge to it. That's the thriller portion to it. He wasn't ever really complex or anything. It was very flat, not developed, didn't have a good sense of suspense and mystery to it, at least not enough for me. At number 2 is One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus. This was a YA debut novel, and it really felt like a debut novel. The good thing going for it, which is the only reason it's not my number 1 least favorite book, is that Karen M. McManus does write suspense well, and she had me going and on the edge of my seat for a large chunk of this book, at least the first half of it. When I say that this book felt like a debut novel, I just don't feel like the characterization was very well developed. It relied a lot on cliches and stereotypes These are characters that you've read about a million times before, especially in YA novels. The tropes were very heavy with it, but the thing that made this a least favorite read of the year for me is that it plays with people's identities and their marginalizations and uses them as plot twists or plot devices. It does use sexuality and mental illness as plot devices. It also really heavily demonizes mental illness, in my opinion, as somebody who has the same mental illness as some of the characters in the book. It just was offensive to me in how it represented my mental illness. And my least favorite book of the year was Replica by Lauren Oliver. The reason that this one is my least favorite is because it had a poor plot, poor characters, poor romance, and terrible fat representation. One of the main characters is fat, and all of the narration in the book is third person, and we are constantly being told by this third person, not from the character narration, that she's fat, she's hideous, she's a hippopotamus, she's the size of a parade balloon. She wasn't made by God, but by some drunk in an alleyway who just, I can't even with that one quote from this book, like just, it was horrible. I just can't. There was also a lot of thin shaming in it as well. Like, this book just had a lot of issues with weight, and these examples of weight shaming were constant throughout the book. I think I pulled out at least like 30 different quotes about weight that just were awful. Didn't like it. The plot did not make up for it to me. It wasn't as interesting as I hoped it would be. I thought the format was pretty awful with the whole splitting the book into two different characters' sides because they weren't different enough and they weren't first person, so like you weren't hearing their internal thoughts or anything. You just had to do a lot of backtracking. There was just no redeeming quality to this book to me. It was 1 star. It was my least favorite read of the year. I also want to talk about the books that I DNF'd this year, and this does not necessarily mean that I hated these books, but I do want to talk you through why I DNF'd them. So first up, I DNF'd Friend Request, who I don't remember who the author of this one is, but it'll be up here in the image. Premise sounds very interesting. It's about a girl who gets a friend request on Facebook one day from someone she thought was dead. And I think I just picked it up when I was just way too saturated with thrillers. And I did make it several chapters in, but it just wasn't giving me the suspense level that I wanted from thrillers. I had just read some really good ones, and I was kind of like burned out on the genre, and this one wasn't living up to it, so I was like, I'm gonna put it down. And I just kind of forgot about it and never went back to it. I also DNF'd The Near Witch by Victoria Schwab. This book is not bad. I don't have any negative feelings towards it. It was just very slow, and it never gripped me. And I got probably a third of the way into this book, and I just, every time I would pick it up, I felt like I was forcing myself to read it. I hope to be able to revisit this one in the future and finish it, but it's a very slow atmospheric thing, and I just was not in the mood for it at the time that I picked it up. I DNF'd The Chemist by Stephanie Meyer. This one I tried on audiobook, and it was so boring, and I had been reading it, listening to it for days, and I could have sworn to you guys I was like 200 pages in, and I looked at the book and I was 56 pages into this book, and it felt like it had taken me ages to get just 56 pages into the book. So to me it was boring, a lot of info dumpy, and like I didn't really know why the things were happening, but I could tell you exactly all the little booby traps the character would set up for herself whenever she would go to bed at night so that no one could get her, but I didn't really understand why people cared to come after her. So I just never got to a point where this book gripped me, and I didn't want to force myself to finish it, so DNF'd it, never came back to it. I also DNF'd a novella, which is kind of weird because like novellas are like, what, 70 pages or something? It was Locked. It's by Rebecca Serle. It was part of her Famous in Love series. In the book Famous in Love, which I did enjoy, it refers to a fictional book in their world, which the characters in Famous in Love are adapting a movie of this book called Locked. So Rebecca Serle came out with the novella called Locked, which is supposed to be that book in their world. So I started reading it thinking, oh, this is going to be cool. I'll be reading the book that these characters keep talking about. And it wasn't exactly how the characters in the main book were describing it, and it was like worse than the opinion I got of it from the main book. So I just didn't care. And I mean, that's saying a lot to DNF a novella because they're so short, but I just couldn't even get through it. And then the last book that I DNF'd this year was Never Fade by Alexandra Bracken, which is the second book in her Darkest Minds trilogy. I've been wanting to read this trilogy forever. I did enjoy the first book, but I read this one I think shortly after Wayfarer, which was earlier in this video on my least favorite books list. And I just have come to learn I don't enjoy Alexandra Bracken's writing. She gets very caught up in descriptions, and Never Fade just started out in a new place, and I didn't really understand how we had gotten here. I just didn't enjoy it at all, and decided that I wasn't invested in this series or these characters anymore, and I just don't care to continue the series. So that was the other book that I DNF'd this year. So I hope you guys have enjoyed listening to what my least favorite books were and the books that I couldn't even finish. I would love to hear from you what your least favorite read of the year was and why. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the comments. Bye!